Imagine, after decades of careful saving, you're finally enjoying retirement. Your financial advisor assured you that you'd done everything right. Then one day, you check your accounts and feel that sickening jolt of panic. Your savings are disappearing far faster than planned. The retirement you worked your entire life for is slipping through your fingers, and the terrifying question looms: what happens when the money runs out? This isn't a rare worst-case scenario. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, a shocking 70% of retirees are on track to deplete their savings far sooner than expected, with nearly 40% running completely dry within just 15 years of retirement. Even more disturbing, many of these financial casualties were diligent savers who followed conventional wisdom for decades. The truly frightening part? Most don't realize they're in trouble until it's too late to course correct. By then, options become severely limited, downsizing under duress, becoming dependent on family members, or living in genuine poverty despite a lifetime of hard work. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on why so many retirement plans collapse despite decades of disciplined saving, and revealing the critical adjustments that separate the financially secure 30% from the struggling majority. These aren't complex investment strategies requiring financial genius. They're practical, actionable steps that address the real-world retirement risks your financial advisor probably never mentioned. Whether you're already retired and feeling that growing knot of financial anxiety, or still working and determined to avoid this fate, what you'll learn today could be the difference between retirement security and becoming another statistical casualty of America's silent retirement crisis. The path to retirement insecurity rarely happens overnight. Instead, it's a gradual erosion that begins with flawed planning assumptions and accelerates through a series of financial blind spots that most retirees never see coming until it's too late. Let's examine the hidden forces destroying retirement savings and how to shield yourself from their impact. Trap number 1. The longevity gamble you're almost certainly losing. The most dangerous threat to your financial security isn't market crashes or inflation. It's outliving your money because you've underestimated your own lifespan. When today's 65-year-olds were born, average life expectancy was under 70 years. Now, a 65-year-old couple has a 50% chance of at least one spouse living beyond 90, and a 25% chance of one living past 95. Here's where the fear should set in. Most retirement plans are still built around outdated lifespans, creating a potential 10-15-year funding gap that no amount of coupon clipping or budget tightening can overcome. The math is brutally simple. A retirement plan for 20 years that stretches to 30 years requires 50% more money. A shortfall that typically emerges when you're least able to recover financially. What's truly frightening is that running out occurs at life's most vulnerable stage, when health issues are at their peak and earning capacity has essentially vanished. Imagine facing your final years with mounting medical bills, unable to afford proper care, and becoming a financial burden on children who have their own retirement to worry about. This scenario unfolds daily for thousands of Americans who believed their retirement planning was adequate. The 30% who avoid this fate approach longevity differently. Instead of using average life expectancy in their planning, they plan for age 95 to 100 as their baseline, regardless of family history or current health. This seemingly conservative assumption has become increasingly realistic with medical advances, especially for those with access to good health care. Establish guaranteed lifetime income streams beyond just Social Security. Whether through carefully structured annuities, rental properties, or other vehicles that produce income regardless of lifespan, they create financial certainty that conventional investments cannot provide. Maintain some growth investments even in later years. Rather than shifting entirely to safe investments that guarantee losing to inflation, they maintain carefully calibrated exposure to growth investments even in their 70s and 80s. Recognizing that their time horizon may still be 20+ years, create separate longevity reserves specifically for their final 5 to 10 years, often using financial products designed to provide enhanced benefits for late life needs. These funds remain untouched during the go-go years of early retirement, protected for when they'll be most crucial. Without these protections, even substantial retirement savings face the mathematical certainty of depletion if your life extends beyond your financial planning horizon, a risk that grows more likely with each medical advance. Trap number 2. The healthcare costs that will devastate your nest egg. I have Medicare, so healthcare costs are covered. This dangerous misconception leads directly to financial catastrophe for thousands of retirees annually. The brutal reality? Medicare covers only about 60% of healthcare costs, leaving you exposed to expenses that can rapidly drain even substantial savings. The numbers are staggering and widely underestimated. According to Fidelity Investments, the average 65-year-old couple will need approximately $350 million for healthcare expenses during retirement. And that excludes long-term care costs, which average $138,000 annually for a private nursing home room. What makes these costs particularly devastating is their unpredictable, often sudden nature. One major health event can erode decades of careful saving in months, creating financial ripple effects that never recover. Even more insidious are the steadily rising out-of-pocket costs that gradually erode reserves year after year. The financially stable 30% approach healthcare costs with clear-eyed pragmatism by budgeting healthcare as their second largest expense category after housing, not as an afterthought. They recognize that as they age, healthcare will likely consume an increasingly larger percentage of their budget, potentially reaching 15 to 20% of expenses in later years. Carrying comprehensive supplemental insurance beyond basic Medicare, including prescription drug coverage and Medigap policies that limit out-of-pocket expenses. While these premiums feel expensive, they create crucial predictability in an otherwise volatile expense category. Establishing dedicated healthcare emergency funds separate from other savings, specifically earmarked for medical surprises. This compartmentalization prevents healthcare emergencies from derailing their broader financial plans. Investigating long-term care options before they're needed. Whether through specialized insurance, hybrid policies, or intentional asset structuring, they create strategies for potential care needs when options are still plentiful rather than during a crisis. Without these protections, even retirees who successfully navigated other financial challenges often find their savings rapidly depleted by healthcare costs they never fully anticipated in their planning. Trap number 3. The withdrawal rate miscalculation. Quietly draining your savings. You've likely heard of the 4% rule, the conventional wisdom suggesting you can safely withdraw 4% of your retirement savings annually, adjusted for inflation, without running out of money over a 30-year retirement. This widely accepted guideline has guided countless retirement plans. There's just one critical problem. It's increasingly proving unreliable in today's economic environment. Developed in the 1990s during a period of higher interest rates and different market conditions, this one-size-fits-all approach fails to account for today's extended retirements, lower bond returns, increased market volatility, and sequence of returns risk. For many retirees, following this outdated rule is directly accelerating their path to financial insecurity. The most alarming aspect? The damage occurs incrementally, often invisibly, until you reach a tipping point where recovery becomes mathematically impossible. By then, your options narrow dramatically: severe lifestyle downgrades, returning to work at advanced ages, or becoming financially dependent on others. The 30% who maintain financial stability throughout retirement have abandoned this static approach in favor of more responsive withdrawal strategies. They implement dynamic withdrawal systems that adjust based on market conditions and portfolio performance, rather than rigidly following an inflation-adjusted percentage. This means taking less during market downturns and potentially more during strong performance years. They create retirement income tiers separating essential expenses, housing, food, healthcare, from discretionary spending, travel, gifts, entertainment. Essential expenses are covered by guaranteed income sources, while discretionary spending flexes based on investment performance. They establish cash buffers of 2 to 3 years of expenses to avoid selling investments during market downturns, one of the primary accelerants of retirement fund depletion. This strategic liquidity allows them to make withdrawal decisions based on opportunity rather than necessity. They regularly recalibrate withdrawal rates based on actual longevity experience, healthcare needs, and financial conditions rather than applying a static formula throughout retirement. These adjustments occur before small imbalances compound into unsolvable problems. Without these adaptive approaches, even substantial retirement savings can be depleted through the mathematical certainty of fixed withdrawals from fluctuating investments over extended time periods. Trap number 4. The tax time bombs set to explode in your later years. "I'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement." This common assumption leads many retirees into a tax situation that's not just worse than expected, but potentially devastating to their carefully constructed financial plans. The retirement tax landscape contains hidden triggers and thresholds that can suddenly increase your effective tax rate just when you're most financially vulnerable. Consider these tax accelerants that catch retirees by surprise. Required minimum distributions, RMDs, that force withdrawals from tax-deferred accounts beginning at age 73, often pushing retirees into higher tax brackets regardless of whether they need the money. Social Security tax thresholds that can suddenly make up to 85% of your benefits taxable when your income crosses specific limits, essentially creating marginal tax rates far higher than your bracket suggests. Medicare premium surcharges, IRMAA, that can increase your healthcare costs by thousands annually based on income, functioning as a de facto tax that most retirement plans never account for. The widow's penalty that often pushes surviving spouses into higher tax brackets when filing as individuals rather than couples, creating tax acceleration precisely when financial vulnerability is highest. The combined impact of these tax triggers can erode retirement savings 20 to 40% faster than projected in conventional planning. Even more troubling, they typically accelerate as you age, when your flexibility to respond has diminished. The financially secure 30% protect themselves through proactive tax management. They implement strategic Roth conversions during lower income years, systematically shifting money from tax-deferred to tax-free accounts before RMDs create forced taxable income. They coordinate account withdrawals for tax efficiency rather than convenience, intentionally managing which accounts they tap annually to control their adjusted gross income and avoid threshold triggers. They incorporate tax projections for their entire retirement, not just the next year, identifying future tax spikes and proactively restructuring assets to smooth their tax exposure over time. They consider asset location as carefully as asset allocation, positioning investments with different tax characteristics in appropriate account types to minimize long-term tax drag. Without these tax management strategies, retirees often encounter cascading tax consequences that compound over time, significantly accelerating the depletion of their retirement resources. Trap number 5. The inflation reality far worse than the headlines suggest. "I'll adjust my withdrawals for inflation." This seemingly prudent approach contains a dangerous flaw. It assumes your personal inflation rate matches official statistics. For retirees, this assumption is not just wrong, but potentially catastrophic to your financial security. The brutal reality is that retiree inflation typically runs 1.5 to 2% higher than the consumer price index, creating a substantial gap between planning assumptions and actual expenses. This inflation differential compounds devastatingly over a multi-decade retirement. What makes this particularly dangerous is that the categories experiencing the highest inflation rates, healthcare, prescription drugs, assisted living, and home care, represent an increasing portion of your budget as you age. Meanwhile, categories where prices might decrease, like technology or clothing, typically constitute a shrinking percentage of your spending. At a 2% differential compounded over 25 years, your actual expenses could be nearly 65% higher than projected. A shortfall no amount of budget tightening can overcome once it fully manifests. The 30% who maintain purchasing power throughout retirement approach. Inflation with strategic sophistication. They build retirement budgets using age-banded expense projections that account for changing spending patterns throughout retirement, not simplified straight-line inflation adjustments. This recognizes that healthcare costs might inflate at 5 to 6%, while other expenses might track closer to general inflation. They create explicit inflation hedges within their portfolios, not just growth investments. These include Treasury inflation-protected securities, TIPS, I-bonds, certain categories of real estate, and other assets specifically designed to maintain purchasing power. They regularly reassess their personal inflation rate by tracking actual expenses against projections, allowing early detection of inflation differentials before they compound into unsolvable gaps. They maintain strategic leverage when appropriate, such as fixed-rate mortgages on properties that can serve as a hedge against inflation by fixing major expenses while allowing income and assets to grow with or above inflation. Without these inflation-fighting strategies, retirees often experience a gradual but relentless erosion of purchasing power that eventually transforms adequate resources into inadequate ones, regardless of how careful their initial planning appeared. These 5 retirement traps: longevity miscalculation, healthcare cost underestimation, withdrawal rate errors, tax acceleration, and personal inflation differentials, create a perfect storm that explains why 70% of retirees face financial insecurity despite decades of disciplined saving. What makes these threats particularly dangerous is their interconnected nature. Each one amplifies the others, creating a downward financial spiral that becomes increasingly difficult to escape. What truly separates the financially secure 30% from the struggling majority isn't necessarily how much they accumulated before retirement, though that certainly helps. Rather, it's their strategic approach to protecting and sustaining those resources once earned income stops. They recognize that distribution phase planning requires fundamentally different strategies than accumulation phase planning, an adjustment that conventional financial advice often fails to emphasize. The good news: even if you're already in retirement, implementing these protection strategies can significantly improve your financial trajectory. It's rarely too late to make adjustments that enhance your long-term security, though earlier action provides greater impact. First, reimagine your retirement time horizon. Build your financial strategy around a potential 30-plus year retirement, even if family history or current health suggests otherwise. This buffer provides protection against longevity risk while creating options if your journey is shorter. Remember that planning for age 95 and living to 85 creates far better outcomes than planning for 85 and living to 95. Second, implement a dynamic withdrawal strategy that responds to actual market conditions rather than rigidly following formulas. Consider working with a financial professional to develop withdrawal guidelines with built-in flexibility, particularly for discretionary expenses. This adaptability helps preserve your resources during market downturns while allowing you to benefit during favorable conditions. Third, create explicit healthcare funding within your retirement plan. This includes both monthly budget allocations for predictable expenses and separate reserves for potential care needs. Investigate options like health savings accounts, if still working, dedicated healthcare funds, or insurance solutions depending on your situation and age. Fourth, develop a multi-year tax management strategy rather than making decisions year by year. Work with a tax professional experienced in retirement distribution planning to identify opportunities for tax diversification, strategic Roth conversions, and threshold management techniques that can significantly extend the life of your savings. Finally, implement specific inflation protection strategies within your financial plan. This includes both investment components specifically designed to maintain purchasing power and regular reassessment of your personal inflation rate compared to planning assumptions. Early detection of inflation differentials allows for course corrections before the gaps become unmanageable. Remember that these protections work synergistically. Each one strengthens the others, creating resilience against the forces that deplete most retirement savings prematurely. The goal isn't just making your money last throughout retirement, but maintaining the freedom, dignity, and independence that financial security provides during this important life chapter. As we conclude our examination of why so many retirement plans falter and how to avoid that outcome, I hope you feel empowered rather than frightened. Understanding these risks is the essential first step toward addressing them effectively. The statistic we began with, that 70% of retirees risk depleting their savings too quickly, isn't a prophecy you must fulfill. With strategic adjustments to your retirement approach, you can position yourself among the financially secure 30% who maintain independence and choices throughout their later years. I encourage you to take one specific action this week towards strengthening your retirement security. Perhaps schedule a distribution-focused review with a financial professional experienced in retirement income planning, or begin tracking your actual expenses against inflation to determine your personal inflation rate, or investigate guaranteed income options that could provide lifetime security regardless of longevity. If you found this information valuable, please subscribe to our channel for more content addressing the real challenges of retirement financial security. Remember that financial security in retirement isn't just about money, it's about maintaining independence, dignity, and choices during a life phase that may last decades. The effort you invest in protecting your resources creates dividends of freedom and peace of mind that extend far beyond the numbers in your accounts.